Hello, friends and followers. Okay, yesterday I found myself going back to Chesterton. I don't know whether I have an old book here. Is The Everlasting Man. I don't know whether you have read it. I don't know whether it is still being published. I have an old book here published in, I think is the 1940s. An edition from the 1940s, I believe. I'm trying to find it. Anyway, I found myself going back to Chesterton because of what I was hearing on, in the social media about what happened in France yesterday with Marine Le Pen and so on. You've heard about it. Why Chesterton? Because I went into a reverie of sorts, thinking, where is all this going? Like practically everybody, I'm wondering, this is not sustainable. These changes that are occurring, certainly in Europe and also in the United States. And just to take a little bit of refuge, perhaps, I went there, among other things. Perhaps just as an oasis, I suppose, trying not to fall into some kind of despair about what is happening. And whether in fact things have gone on so far that we can't even find an alternative. What is the alternative to this? You remember that, things might even get worse, I fear. You remember that the prodigal son, yes, he didn't come back to his father's house until he was practically forced to eat the carrot pods or beans eaten by pigs, until he got to that point that he had to eat what pigs ate and be grateful for it. And even then, the carrot pods were denied to him. And it seems that we might have to be ready to, in our societies in Europe, that we are going back to that stage where we might even have to eat a few carrot pods ourselves. There's a transformation going on. It's a social transformation. And we have to be aware of it, don't you think? And we have to be aware also that it has come to this point because along the way we were invited, perhaps we did it consciously or unconsciously, we threw away things that we should have never thrown away, things that were good for us, and we went ahead and happily thrown them into the garbage can. I have been talking about tradition lately, and I want to go back to that. Alternatives, well, it's easier said than done, I know, but this is just me thinking aloud with you. Yes, we have to go back to building a new kind of community, a new kind of society. The usual things that we always did, have children, take care of the elderly, faithful to the ones we committed ourselves to. It has to be almost an anthropological transformation here. Of course it will not happen overnight. Because social transformation of this kind needs, after all, political organization, new political ideas. It cannot happen overnight or in a very short time. That would be deceiving ourselves. And if anyone is promising us to change everything in a short space of time, I think they are deceiving us. But it will inevitably happen, that social transformation. But it will happen when the system in which we are now trapped in, begins to collapse by its own weight. And I think it will, perhaps even sooner than we think. It might not be far off the way things are going. And accept that we might not ourselves experience the changes that are needed for that transformation. We may not live long enough. But, you know, our ancestors did the same. They fought many wars, and they fought political systems. And they did that perhaps also knowing that they would not see the fruits and the results. But they were willing to do that sacrifice for future generations, for their children and grandchildren, that they might have a better society. The best we can do is perhaps not turn our eyes away and help in whichever way we can. Because the way things are going at the moment in Europe, in our societies, in our political systems, I don't need to list them here, you know them, but this is not sustainable. And we might draw hope from the fact that every oppressive human structures that have ever been with us have always fallen. Inevitably, they always fall. The most oppressive human structures or institutions. Always. All of them. As I was thinking about these things, I came across something that is not necessarily new, but I thought I would talk about two particular issues, since I'm talking about embrace, going back to what we have thrown away. Not going back, things are past and can never be the same, but to try to regain that philosophy of life, that religion, that view, that world view that we once had. I'm going to deal with two examples. In one of the videos that came up in my telephone was someone talking about those homosexual blessings that the Vatican was doing. This was in the news a few months ago, I believe, but I want to deal with it in order to look at the larger picture here. Needless to say, I'm not a doctor of the church, but I think these blessings are a hoax. I think there is deception there. And I think if I were homosexual, and I am not, I would actually feel quite humiliated. Let me start at the beginning to see if I can put it all in context. The church the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. Yes, the traditional Christian Church, the Church. The Church has always believed that sexual relations have to be between a man and a woman. Now, hear me out. Not only that, but has always believes and will continue to believe that it is between a woman and within the marriage bond. I know that sounds like, a million years ago, but that is what has always been there. That is what the Church has always taught. And it has always been so, and it will continue to be so. The Church is never going to bless premarital relationships or pleasing oneself or marrying someone of your own sex. The Church is never going to bless that. What the Church has always done, however, is to recognize that people are not angels, and we have our weaknesses. And remember Chesterton, yes. He said something when he converted to Catholicism. He said, in this way, I'm not quoting him literally, but in this way that he had of putting things so crisply, he said, I always believed that the Catholic Church knew a lot about virtue. I never expected her to know so much about sin. Indeed, it does. And so she knows that human beings are not angels, and we are weak, and we are going to fall again and again. So she knows that human beings live in adulteral relationships. Yes, I'm going to use that kind of knowledge because it goes back. You will see why I'm using it, and I am not shying away from it. And it's actually, a kind of language that sounds very old-fashioned, but it is a language that especially young people nowadays are attracted to, as if they missed those lines, those boundaries. And the Church has always recognized those weaknesses, but had to, while recognizing those weaknesses, all of us, she nevertheless have to accompany us, to be at our side. There was a French, let me explain this with this quote, I think it will make it clear. A French Dominican theologian who died in 1964. His name, you may have read him, Garrigou-Lagrange. He wrote books on, the church, scholastics, spirituality. In a very good way, he tried to bring together the two. I don't want to say theologies. The two sides of the theology: the scholastics, Thomas Aquinas, and the mystical, Saint John of the Cross. Tried to unite them in a sort of way, and he wrote a book entitled "The Three Stages of the Interior Life." I would urge you to read some of his works. They'll certainly make you think. And he said, and this is a quote from him, "The church is intolerant on principles because she believes. But she is tolerant." He doesn't say but. The church is intolerant on principles because she believes, and is tolerant in actions, in the practices, because she loves. The modern world is tolerant on principles because it does not believe, but intolerant on your actions because it does not love. Don't know whether I should read it again. I don't want to bore you, but I think it is probably a good thing. The church is intolerant on principles, about principles, of principles, because she believes, and is tolerant on actions or acts because she loves. The modern world is tolerant on principles that can be changed because it does not believe, but intolerant on your acts or your actions because it does not love. I think that is quite profound. The church throughout the ages has had that wise ability, that wise capacity to bring these two areas together, principle and practice, to bring them into harmony. In actual everyday life, therefore, the papacy, would constantly remind us of principles. Yes, no. But you always had the local parish priest who knew the people, who knew that the people were suffering, who knew that people were doing this or that, and since we are talking about sexuality, that people were in adulterous situations, all that, in order to try to remind them, to welcome them into the church. The problem is when there is an inversion of this, when there is a church that does not love. Or, let me put it this way, a church that has lost its capacity to love in practice and then pretends falsely to create a simulation of love in its principles. There has been an inversion of a church who has lost its capacity to love the practices and then therefore pretends falsely to create a simulation of love on the principles. A simulation of love. It's fake love. It's a fake understanding of what love is. It's a hoax. There is deceit in those blessings. They are false blessings. Blessings in the Catholic and Orthodox Church I don't want you to think that I have a fetish about language, but they have to be done within the liturgy for them to have meaning. a blessing is within the liturgy of the church. And blessings that are blessings are sacramental to be blessings. And so there are words in that sacramental liturgy, and within that liturgy, the divine grace through the sacrament. So the words are always subject to a certain formula. The priest cannot just go around doing whatever he wants, saying whatever he wants, and pretends that that is sacramental. It's not like that. This provision by the current, what shall I call them? I don't want to say traitors. What do I say? The present people occupying certain places in power at the Vatican do not, in their provision for these blessings, do not involve liturgical formulae. So what ends up, and it's rather painful, is that you see those blessings are not real blessings. They are like the blessings that, children ask for their little puppy or their little kitten or their budger. It's not a sacramental blessing. It's not, therefore, a real blessing. That is the reality. It is a hoax. And that is the truth. Now, the progressives, and you know who I mean by that, the people pushing the envelope here always, demanding that the church does this and the church accepts that and so on. No, they know this very well. They know. But pretend that they like these blessings. Oh yes, and so much. They pretend, because it is a further way to infiltrate, to soil, to profane the sacred, or even to give bad example and to confuse you, to create doubt on you. It's like a little Trojan horse there inside, yeah? But they know that nothing has been granted, not really, to homosexual couples. And if I were homosexual, a serious one, a serious person, I'm not talking about those who go on parades half naked. I mean a person, a homosexual, but a person with dignity, a serious person. I would be offended by this farce, by this provision by Bergoglio, so-called Francis. They're all in the same band. You know, in that provision, they even tell them not to actually go, when they go to these fake blessings, not to even dress up. You know, like you dress up for a wedding or a baptism or something. No, don't even bother. Don't make it anything special, because it is not. This is lamentable and this is regrettable. Let me talk about something else now. Because I started by saying that I was concerned about France, and so therefore the question of freedom and liberty and all that came to my mind. freedom and liberty, also a term very much confused nowadays, or its real meaning not understood. The Catholic and Orthodox concept of freedom is that what makes you worthy is the use you make of it to do good. Okay, that sounds too general, doesn't it? It sounds... Let me explain. Freedom, as it is understood politically in liberalism, tells you that what makes you worthy is the exercise of that freedom, regardless of the moral judgment that your actions deserve or not. In other words, they call freedom the exercise of it. And that is the main difference. But it is true that many people think that freedom is a liberal concept, that it started with liberalism. That is not the case. But the word freedom and liberty was something that was known before that, before the Protestant Revolution and then the liberalism that it created. And it was there before they arrived. But as is usual with so many other things, they inverted its meaning. The Catholic concept of freedom is linked to truth, inevitably, to the truth of things. What makes us worthy is that we may use our freedom for good, that we may use it for good. The concept of liberal freedom is not linked necessarily to truth. It's actually separated from it. How? Let me explain. Free will is a fundamental concept, yes, linked to human nature. We, human beings, are capable of deciding what we do, good or evil, or, We are free to decide. That is to say, as Catholic theologians say, that you are free to be saved or to be lost. You remember that we don't hear it anymore. You know, you're free to go along the road to perdition, they used to say, the old priests. Yeah. What liberal freedom does is to do away with moral judgment. You take that away, and then moral judgment of your action, and then any one thing can be good or bad according to whether it suits you or not. You can get things done more quickly that way. You can even be more successful that way, but there is no moral foundation. There is no moral foundation there, and so everything is built on sand. And as anything built on sand, it will collapse. No firm foundations there. Sometimes we are blinded by this word freedom because it seems to have lost its meaning now. it sometimes is like a word that doesn't mean anything anymore. It's as if, you see, in liberalism we speak of progress, but it's not, I don't understand the word as advance, becoming better, but movement, progressing along, yeah. So it is understood in that word, in that sense of movement. You can choose this, you can choose that. But it is not movement what is important. It's direction. Is the direction of that movement, is where you're going. It is in what direction you're leading. In other words, freedom, but freedom for what? Freedom to what end? Of course I can opt for evil and bad and malevolence and malice and malignity and wrongdoing. Yes, of course I can opt to do that. And that would be my choice. But you see, I know what I am choosing. I may ignore it, I may fight against it, but I know that that is wrong. I know I'm choosing bad. And I know that that is so. And I choose it nevertheless because it suits me. Liberalism's understanding of freedom is, it doesn't really matter if what you choose is good or bad. What is important is that you choose. That is what the importance of it is. The important thing is that you have the freedom to choose, regardless of whether it's good or bad. Freedom is you choosing. Never mind the direction. And that is what freedom is, they'll tell you. Take moral judgment out of it. I told you before about those fake blessings, yeah, on homosexual people and others. So here we go again. This is this understanding of freedom by liberalism. It's a sort of another blessing, as it were. It's another sort of fake blessing. It's another kind of, it's a secular blessing to our acts. Forget if this path is good or bad. Just take it. Take the one that you like the best. The one that suits you regardless. Because you see, you are free, and that is your freedom to choose regardless. Actually, it's probably more than a blessing. It's probably more than a secular blessing. It's probably also an absolution designed to create relief from any moral judgment. And you may say, Lali, you are exaggerating a little bit here. I know very many people who actually are liberal, yet very much capable of moral discernment and moral judgment. Yes, I know that. But I contend that here the word freedom has suffered a mutation almost. Because this concept of freedom, of liberty, accepts evil as an equal partner to good. In the end, you know, if you don't accept God, if you do not accept the transcendent, if you do not accept Christian redemption, if all you end up, people in the West, a lot of people are just ending up with an ideology, I want you to consider the possibility that you are in a cage. And I would ask you to dare come out of that cage, little by little, if need be, to at least open the door of that cage. Many people are opting back, especially young people now, to a traditional way of life. Because pretty soon, unless we take shelter in the truth of the ages, this progressive liberal thought you're going to end up looking. I know that many of them think that they are cool still by being anti-religion, but that is such an 18th century passé thing, especially now. And pretty soon, if you're stuck there, in that cage, you may start looking, consider the possibility that you may start looking like those, the fiddlers in the Titanic. You remember the movie? You're going down, down, and you're fiddling away. You have nothing to lose if you start considering opening the door to the truth of the ages, which is also the wisdom that our ancestors accumulated, and come out of that cage. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.